Hey everybody, welcome to The Best Thing Ever, a new podcast where a group of friends go on a quest for bestness. Basically, we're looking for new and deeper ways to appreciate the things that our friends like. This is episode 6 of season 1, and we are talking about pro wrestling. That's right, each week we nominate one thing that could be the best thing ever. One of us gives a presentation, a deep dive into the topic's history and philosophy, and then we give it a classic corporate employee review, and then rank it on the master list where it must compete with everything else we've ever reviewed, and only one thing can be the best thing ever. This week in our professional wrestling episode, we're going to feature such incredible things as Neo versus Agent Smith, Cell, and The Undertaker. I don't know what any of that means. I just grabbed it from the presentation. Let me introduce you to the team in a game that I call 3 hosts and a lie, and then and then a guest who is not lying. So
the truthful guest. 3 hosts and a lie, and a truthful guest.
One of these days, a guest is going to lie to me, and that will throw the whole thing off. But so far, I don't think it's happened. I'm Alex Falcone. I'm your host. I'm a comedian out of Los Angeles, and I have appeared on 2 jumbotrons, 2 different jumbotrons. Also joining us, that could be true, could be a lie. We'll find out next week. Also joining us, our marketing daddy. It's Ezra Fox. He came in second in an NFL Blitz tournament on a technicality.
Yeah, it was. If you want to date it, it was sponsored by Surge. It was inside of a Toys R Us.
Ooh.
So, yeah.
So it either was a long time ago or again right now.
Yeah.
Could be recent, right? Aren't those? Isn't Surge and Toys R Us both back?
Only in Canada.
Only in Canada.
Don't call it a comeback.
Well, of course. Also joining us, again, that could be true, could be false. I like the added detail, kind of makes it sound plausible. Also joining us, Anthony Lopez is our angry socialist historian. He dreamed as a child of being the WWE World Heavyweight Champion, and he's got the stone cold finger to prove it.
This is my stone cold foam finger. I got this.
I have never seen a stone cold middle finger or a foam middle finger. That's hilarious.
These were huge back in the 90s.
Wrestling foam hand?
Yeah, I got this.
I'll be right back.
Yes, Jamie's going to go to foam hand. Do it.
I got this at WrestleMania 19, where I was in attendance.
What are they up to now?
One of the best nights of my life. I don't know, 30 something.
Oh,
we
okay.
got another.
It's annual. There's not a lot of WrestleMania.
No, they do one a year. Yeah.
All right. Let's see it, Jamie. What has Jamie got? You can see if you're watching along on YouTube.com.
Oh, nice.
Oh, he's got the 2 fingers. He's got a peace sign.
For scissoring.
Yeah.
Oh, it's for
I gotta
scissoring,
say, Alex, I'm really disappointed in you. I think for this show, you should have called this segment 3 shoots and a work.
3 shoots and a work.
Because
I don't know what it means, but I like it.
That's definitely much more in the wrestling vernacular. And I think we got to respect the business in this episode. That's something that's going to be very important to me, is that
3
we respect and protect the business.
We will. We at all costs. Also joining us, rounding out our panel of hosts, Hunter Donaldson is a board game influencer, and his fun fact is he was an extra on the first Twilight film. Which
that's true. It's mostly because I'm really close friends with Kristen Stewart. So it's actually
Chase doing Hunbun.
Yeah. Because we became friends because we're both big Banjo-Kazooie heads, and so we were kind of we were also both kind of early online, so we were kind of on the Banjo-Kazooie forums,
just
talking a lot.
Just to be clear on what makes a truth, it's the part that I put on, not the additional detail. You could definitely,
but you need the additional. I was also an extra in Spencer, that movie that came out a couple years ago. I was in that. I'm in a lot of Kristen Stewart.
Case Stu loves finding all those gold puzzle pieces. She was fire with that.
You did a really good British accent in Spencer too. I know in period stuff, especially.
That's funny that you say that, because
he was in the background doing a British accent saying peas and carrots, but it sounded
exactly.
British.
Well, originally I was supposed to get a voice where I was supposed to get one line, but I kept messing up. It would cut to me, and I would be like, "All right," and then they'd be confused. Because I was just supposed to say "all right," but in a British voice, and I kept messing it up.
I hope this is true so badly.
Revisit.
It was the Banjo-Kazooie forums, 1995. Everybody was becoming besties.
Yeah.
I will. We'll find out who is telling the truth next week. To wrap up from last week, true. I have competed in a combat juggling tournament before. That one was true. I don't know if you guys have seen combat juggling. You got clubs, and you're all juggling clubs, but you can use your clubs to knock other people's clubs out of their hands. It's chaos. It's very fun. Also, Ezra's first job was playtesting a computer game as a 3-year-old. I assume it was a game your dad worked on. Is that?
Yeah. I was like hanging out at my dad's work, bang on stuff,
Hunter,
making it crash.
Your parents did win the lottery. They won $1 million.
My parents won $1 million, and they spent it all on good, cool stuff.
Yeah, how much do they still have? Do you think?
Oh, I don't know. We don't talk about that. So I would imagine none, unless some of it's been like hidden in like a hole somewhere.
Oh yeah, it's like good hole money.
I pray to God that someone hid some of that money somewhere.
And then the lie was that Anthony's eaten at the same pizza place every Monday since 2014. That is not true. I just made that one up. Mm-hmm. That was on me.
Nice.
And then we have let's bring in our guest now. We have a very special guest today. They are a comedian out of Portland, and they asked Ben Affleck about Daredevil comics at a Christmas party. It's Jamie Carbone, everybody.
Hi. Hello.
Wait, what Christmas party were you at that Ben Affleck was also at?
Jennifer Garner is also from West Virginia, like I am. Her best friend growing up, her best friend's mom plays golf with my mom.
Whoa.
So we got invited to the same Christmas
party.
Less
plausible than Hunter's story about about the
isn't Jennifer Gardner's best friend Victor Gerbo? Is your mom friends with Victor Gerbo's mom?
I fucking wish, because boy oh boy, don't I love a queer musical fella.
Oh, who doesn't?
But he I mean, god damn it. I was telling the story about Victor Gerbo all of a sudden. So we ended up at the same Christmas party. Nobody was talking to Ben Affleck. So I was like, I'm going to talk to Ben Affleck.
He was
very
just
drunk,
sadly eating a donut in the corner.
No, so he was like chilling on a couch, and like nobody was approaching him. Like everybody was like a void of like social interaction, because nobody wanted to be like weird to Ben Affleck.
Yeah, he hadn't like been at a high stakes poker game in 4 hours, and he was starting the Jones, just shaking in the corner. I need to drop 5 Gs right now.
He did regularly go outside to smoke a comically huge cigar. Yeah. So I do remember that aspect of it.
Wait. Can you, with your hands, like how big would it be? And I'll describe it for the audience. Okay. That seems like a 6-inch, like foot long, maybe 8 inches. I'm not really sure.
I would say it was
Ezra,
like,
you can't do that because the big foam finger is fucking up your sense of scale.
Okay.
No idea.
No.
You're getting
this is what so I had an infection at the time, so my hand was this big. So
So you approached him. You braved the force field around Ben Affleck.
Yeah, so I had to drink, like I made vodka because I was just starting to drink, so I made like I took like a highball glass and I put half vodka in there and then half cranberry, and then I drank 2 of those, and then I was like, I'm going to talk to him. No one else is talking to him. I'm going to talk to him.
Do it.
So I went up, and this was right around, and I remember this is the year, whatever year it was, Fat Albert came out. And I'll explain why that, I remember that
specific moment. That we all know that year where we were when Fat Albert came out.
Fat Albert,
72.
World.
The movie. I'm so sorry. The film starring Mr. Kenan Thompson. So I go up to him, and I'm like, I'm going to do it. And when I got up to him, I said, hey, when your buddy Kevin Smith was writing Daredevil, why did he bring in Mysterio, who was typically a Spider-Man bad guy?
This
and to Ben Affleck's credit,
really thinks about a lot.
Yeah, to his credit, he said, well, if you reread those issues, you'll find out that a lot of that story arc was about Mysterio, like trying to find his own place in the world. And you actually, if you have the collection of it, I actually wrote the introduction to that because this was around the time like the movie came out, and I wanted to, I really enjoyed those issues. And I think if you go back and revisit it, you'll find that it's actually the perfect villain for the story.
Wait, so you got actually by Ben Affleck?
Yes, I did. I absolutely did.
Good one. I mean, that's a good answer.
Yeah.
He knew what he was talking about.
I'm just kidding. Ben Affleck said, "Shut up, leave me alone." That's what I said.
That could have been very easy.
I know you didn't mean it this way because it's just a fact, but there's something so insulting about, hey, why did your friend Kevin Smith blank? Like blaming him for Kevin Smith. Why did your friend
Affleck at a party to talk to you about somebody else's script?
Keep in mind, this was like, if you were a Kevin Smith teen, this was like our time of power. Yeah. You know what I mean?
It's true.
Like Clerks 2 was coming.
Yeah.
Like we were energized. Like Mallrats for life, baby.
Yo, I get it.
But, and then I said, thank you for that answer. I'm gonna go watch Fat Albert with my brothers now. And we left the party to go to the theater to watch. But my younger brother said the thing that is forever etched into my soul when we were leaving. He said to Ben Affleck, "It was nice to meet you, even though I didn't meet you."
That's deep.
Wow, you guys really nailed that interaction with Ben.
Also, can I actually Hunter real quick?
Yes, please.
Yeah, what's up?
Banjo-Kazooie came out in 1998.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah,
Listen, no, real fans were actually on the Banjo-Kazooie forums in 1995. We
the hype cycle of BK was huge.
Rare laid the breadcrumbs of Banjo-Kazooie all through Donkey Kong Country. I don't have to break that down for you.
You absolutely know that's not the case.
Banjo coming. You must be insane.
All right. So you can find Jamie on social media at a Jamie Carbone, not the Jamie Carbone. Just one of them. Could be one of many.
There's a lot of us. Most of them are horse girls.
Real quick, I just want to throw this out here before we move into the actual subject of today's episode. If you happen to be in Portland, me and Jamie are both going to be at Helium on Wednesday. So if you want to come see us do Space Cats, Peace Turtles, and Old Gamers Almanac, my other podcast, come do that.
On Wednesday the 22nd in Portland, Oregon. Let's get into it. We got a show to do today. We're talking about professional wrestling, and who would do this presentation besides the one and only Tony 316. Anthony Lopez, please tell us the complete history or give us a deep dive into professional wrestling.
So, I always forget about the music. It surprises me every time. I got to remember that. Let's talk about professional wrestling.
Let's do it.
So, here's my things. Usually I do like a not a comprehensive, but I try to do like a deep dive into like the history of the thing and sort of how it got to where it is today. But kind of doing a lot of research for this episode, I sort of realized that I truly love wrestling. I do think it deserves to be in this conversation. And the problem is there's nothing I can tell you about the history of wrestling that's going to make Alex like wrestling more, right? Everything I can tell you about wrestling is going to turn you off of wrestling.
I am extremely curious about how we went from Greco-Roman wrestling to this guy in a cat suit standing on the wires. Yes. I am curious about that link.
So what?
But I will say though, Anthony, I want to say before you do this, just to be fair, or be clear, sometimes I approach a topic with some skepticism. This is so far out of my wheelhouse. I talked to Ezra about this the other day. I'm going to try Ezra's empathetic worldview. I am going into this assuming that you are right, that pro wrestling is the best thing ever. That is my stance starting the show. So you could not have someone more on your side. I just don't know why yet. So
that's great. I appreciate that. But what I mean is anything I tell you is going to be the history of, sort of like old school territory wrestling or the WWF or AEW. And that's not what I want to sort of talk about. I want to sort of talk about what wrestling is, right?
Yeah.
So I sort of feel like it's very hard to describe. Ezra was very nice this week and asked if there's any matches I should send him. And they got me thinking about that. And it'd be like if we were doing cricket and someone was like, just send me the 3 greatest cricket moments ever, right? So I actually Googled and watched.
There's one problem with that, which is that those are all 9 days long.
Yeah.
You're watch the best cricket test match of all time. It'll take you October.
But yeah, I mean, I watched just a few cricket highlights, and they were probably exciting, but I don't know how to watch cricket. I don't know how cricket works, so I couldn't get it. So
I'm trying to get the most whiffles in a pancake.
Yes,
I think.
What I'm trying to do here instead is sort of explain why wrestling is appealing, how wrestling works, how you sort of watch wrestling, right?
I love it.
So I want to try to make you guys appreciate the craft and art form of wrestling. So let's pretend you didn't know anything about wrestling, okay? You had never heard of it at all. One day I came to you and was like, Alex, oh my God, you got to come to me to the show with me, right? It's this really crazy show. It's all the best sort of elements of live theater. Meets this weird stunt and magic and illusion show. It has all these really elaborate effects and all these people doing these incredible athletic things. It's loosely improv, and it has kind of daily soap opera-esque storytelling elements where the story is constantly going on, right?
All right.
And at this show, there's this guy named Neo who's gonna fight this guy named Agent Smith. All right. And the thing about Neo is he's the one. He knows Kung Fu. He has this awesome finisher called the Woe, and he's with this faction called Zion. All right. And then on the other side, we have Agent Smith. He's an AI program. He hates humans. He has this finisher called the Blue Pill.
By Bing.
Yeah, manufactured by Bing. He's got this finisher called the Blue Pill, and he's with this like really fucked up faction called the Matrix. And these two guys are gonna fight,
Anthony.
right? This sounds like a pretty great show, doesn't it? Doesn't this sound like something you would want to go see? That, my friend, is professional wrestling. All right. So
That's good professional wrestling.
Yes, good professional wrestling. So
there's so much bad.
Yes.
Well, but we're giving it the best case possible, Jamie. We're not starting out with here's the worst parts of it.
Kind of the thing about wrestling is I'm a lapsed wrestling fan. I was a huge fan of wrestling growing up. I haven't watched a wrestling show seriously in like 15 years, right? But my thing is, I have so much respect for the art form, and I think it can be so much more. I think you can't hold wrestling against wrestling. It's kind of how I look at it, right? Like you can't hold like what stupid people and shitty companies have done to this very young art form and like really hold that against it. I do think that wrestling has a lot of potential to like make you feel emotions and things that like a lot of other kind of like live entertainments just can't do, right?
Jamie, I know we talked about this back in the day when we did a different podcast about wrestling. Are you current or are you also lapsed?
So I am current on AEW. I am only paying attention to a few storylines and what's happening in WWE. And then I know bits and pieces of what's happening on the indie scenes. It's basically like 3 continuities. Like you've got, your Marvel, your DC, and then your Image and your Independence.
Right. Yeah.
And I am very focused on, let's say, Marvel. I know kind of what's happening in DC. And then I know a little bit about the indies, but mostly I just look at the cool comic panels. Oh, this metaphor got away from me.
All right,
just look at the cool finishing moves and call it a day.
Jamie, you would appreciate this then, that as somebody who likes wrestling, it's hard to like kind of have a conversation with people who don't watch it because they don't get it, right? It's a very hard thing to grok wrestling if you've never actually watched it, right? And you kind of have these preconceived notions about it.
One thing I like already, just because you got this nice photo collage for us, and there's people with like incredible human physiques that are like, it's impossible. How does a man look like that? And then you've also got this guy with a bad dye job, lost half his hair, and is like making the crazy eyes. And I like that there's room for both of them.
That's the Undertaker.
Yeah.
Can you please put some respect on the Undertaker?
Alex just found out who the Undertaker is.
I'm glad there's room for him and like whoever this guy's.
And I want to just give you for context. Mark Calloway, the Undertaker, is one of the most impressive physical wrestlers of all time. He is for his size, for being almost 7 feet tall. The amount of fit things he can do.
What?
Yes,
he can also walk the top rope.
Yeah,
or could.
He can do it from the floor. He can jump over the top rope back out of the ring. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah. He's also best friends with the devil.
Yes,
that's true.
He also believes Blue Lives Matter. That's a fun fact about the Undertaker.
Hey, Mark Calloway does. The Undertaker doesn't. The Undertaker is A-cast all day.
Exactly.
Presumably, Undertaker believes no lives matter, right?
I would hope.
That's true.
Or they all matter equally when he undertakes them. They're for him.
So.
Okay, great. So he may be physically impressive specimen too, but terrible hair. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, especially at this
He
time.
also looks like Kelsey Grammer.
Yeah. He wrestled for a very long time. He had a lot of different hairdos. First, I want to talk about one of my favorite things about wrestling. It's sort of the reason I think why I loved magic so much as a kid, why I'm so into movies, stand-up, and stuff like that, is I love anything that has like its own language to it, right?
Sure.
Like and especially because magic and wrestling have a lot of overlap. They use a lot of similar words like gimmick and stuff like that. But there's a whole huge glossary in wrestling, right? I mean, these are just a small fraction of it. But the kind of the important ones I want to work on and sort of like the basics of what wrestling is sort of 4 main concepts. The concept of a face and a heel. Most people know what those are, right? There's a good guy and a bad guy. Babyface is a good guy. Heel's the bad guy.
Is there a baby heel or a man or an adult heel?
Yeah. Or a heel face?
Heel face, yeah. I mean, that there is, it's wrestling became as it sort of like evolved into the 90s and the Attitude Era. The bad guys became the good guys and the good guys became the bad guys because of culture. So that did kind of happen.
Stone Cold, I guess, would be basically a heel face.
Yeah.
So, he was a tweener, baby. Tweener.
Yeah. So there's heat.
Well, The Rock was a heel face too, right?
I mean, The Rock went back and forth, right? He started as a face, and everyone hated him. So they turned him heel, and like that's where he kind of took off, and then
everyone liked it. What a weird life where you're like, man, people hate me if I'm a good guy, but they like me if I'm bad. That's
you should watch The Young Rock. This literally covers all of this.
Yeah. Oh man,
so
I don't feel like he's earned that, but.
There's this concept called heat, which is negative reactions, such as like booing from fans, right? Yeah. And heat is very, very important. It's a very important concept we're going to come back to. And the other one we're going to come back to.
And one thing that every wrestler knows is when you start wrestling, you never make any attachments in your life that you couldn't drop immediately when the heat is on.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, God damn it.
Yeah. Don't have anything in your life you're not willing to pin 1, 2, 3, right? Don't have anything in your life you're not willing to put in an ankle lock and make tap out in the center of the ring. That's the old wrestling.
That's what everybody says.
That's the old Kurt angle.
Yeah, the Kurt angle. The other very important concept I want to talk about is the concept of over, right? So in wrestling, to get over is basically to achieve the desire you want from a crowd reaction, right? So like if an audience really, really likes a wrestler, they get over, right? You also pit someone over. If you're in a wrestling match and you're going to lose to someone, they're going over you, right? So you're going to pit them over, right? Wrestling's fun because it leads to a lot of fun conversation, like language tricks. Like you can say, you can get over without getting over. Like that means you can like come out and give such a good match that even if you lose, people will still like you, right?
Right.
And it's like that's very important. Is the idea of like getting over, right? Is like getting heat and getting over. That's the basic dynamic of wrestling. That's sort of what you want. That's what sort of allows.
Is there the opposite of heat? Is there like if you get a good reaction?
Yeah, that's over.
That's being over. But there's like
bad heat,
good heat. And there's bad heat. Yes. Good heat is like, hey, we love to hate you. Bad heat is like, we just fucking hate you. We wish you were not on our TV.
Yeah.
They call it go away heat or X-Pac heat.
Yeah.
Because X-Pac did not change his character for like 5 years, and everyone was like, we don't like you.
Yeah. So
fascinating.
So let's have this match.
Okay.
Let's have Neo versus Agent Smith. Okay. And first I want to say, you might be angry at me for ripping off movies for wrestling, but I want to say that's been happening in wrestling for a very long time. I want to take an example here of like, here's Sting after The Crow came out. You might notice his look is pretty similar.
I should clarify, looks like not the Sting that I'm used to from The Police. This is a different Sting.
Hey, can I drop a fun fact on that?
Also the same one, just more jacked.
So the wrestling Sting copywrote that name before the other Sting did. So Gordon Sumner actually has to pay wrestling Sting to use the name Sting.
Oh, it's like a URL thing. I get it.
Yeah, Steve Borden is
Jamie Carbone.
Yeah. I also want to point out, like after Mortal Kombat came out, there was a really bad wrestler called Glacier who looks a lot like that. And also,
it's kind of like a homemade costume version of Sub-Zero.
Yeah, these are like Kirkland's signature brand Sub-Zero.
Yeah. Also, I would like to point out, after The Dark Knight came out, Sting stole from another movie. It's mostly Sting who steals from movies. Is kind of my point.
It's
kind of weird.
He was also still a good guy when he looked like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's okay. The best way I could say this Dark Knight version of Sting, it is like, I think the real Joker would be like, this guy is a little bit too much.
Yeah,
I think that's the reaction I think they would have.
Honestly, to me, it looks like Guy Fawkes eating spaghetti.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like to me.
Remember the pasta.
But I think the reason why Sting loves movies so much is he got bit by the bug early. Here's Sting when he tag teamed with RoboCop in the early 90s.
Oh shit! I think he is okay. This at some point, the RoboCop match. I think it was when we talked about RoboCop the movie, but this is a wild thing that happened.
Yeah, this is awesome because it's exactly like pro wrestling in the way that it's like, this is going to be a horrible idea and not work out at well, but we're doing it anyway. Fuck it.
This Sting is like I think wearing like a spaghetti strap tank top is the best way I could describe it.
Yeah, this is Surfer Sting.
It's just like, he looks like he's ready for bed. That's what he looks like to me.
Ready for Betty for sure.
This is like a guy like on like a California beach who also wore face paint for some reason.
Well, sometimes they have a face paint artist, maybe like on the walkway, maybe. So yeah, I get it.
So let's say we're gonna do a match like this, right? So how does a wrestling match actually work? How do like two wrestlers build a wrestling match? Well, how do you start a wrestling match? You start at the finish. So in all wrestling, you start with the end of the match, and then you work backwards to tell the story. And part of the reason why I use like the Matrix as an example of this is that the Matrix is a really good example of sort of like what wrestling does well. And what's like the Matrix has like 5 or 6 action scenes, but none of them are just there to be there, right? Every action scene in the Matrix tells a story. No characters enter and exit an action scene as the same people in the Matrix. And this is what like the best movies do, and this is what the best wrestling does. And this is the thing that's hard to understand if you don't really watch wrestling, is that wrestling, the matches aren't just a bunch of cool moments. They are a story being told by two performers in the ring. And if you don't know you're supposed to be looking for a story, if you don't know how to watch the story and how to read it, you're not going to get the same as you would if you did, right? So this is Dusty Rhodes. Let's pretend he's a booker here. Dusty Rhodes was a real famous booker. A lot of bookers in the wrestling used to be professional wrestling. Bookers do exactly what they sound like. They're in charge of creative. They decide who's going to fight and who's going to win, right? Let's say someone comes in and says, okay, Agent Smith, you're going over with the blue pill, right? And that's all you have, right? And like, depending on the wrestling territory, on the company, nowadays it's very common for like the wrestling to have like full writing teams who write out everything. Matches are very, very planned out. Back in the days, it wasn't quite like that. You'd usually start with the finish, and then wrestlers would kind of have their own style. People like Macho Man were very famous for like, hand writing out the entire match that they were going to do and making their opponent study it. A lot of wrestlers would just call it in the ring, right? Would just like kind of go out there. We know the ending. Let's just figure it out depending on crowd performance, right? So,
and by call it, do you mean they like whisper stuff?
Yeah, they just talk to each other
from body.
No, you can.
There's a lot of clips. Of people like yelling. You can hear them like yelling, "Hey, do this!"
Yeah,
really?
You don't usually hear them over the audience. Oh yeah, John Cena especially. Watch some John Cena matches. You'll be hearing me like clothesline and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. So that's called calling it in the ring, right? That is just you are out there. You call spots to each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, with the way a wrestling match works, is because if you know you're finished, you basically know the climax of your story, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you want to build the match in the way in which you have storytelling, you have your character or your gimmick that you are portraying, and you combine those together and you get the most important concept in wrestling, which is something called ring psychology. So ring psychology is the thing that separates good wrestlers from bad wrestlers. You can be the greatest athlete in the world, but if you can't grok ring psychology, you're never gonna make it. Right? And vice versa. There are horrible wrestlers out there, but they really get ring psychology. So they're able to get over big and they become huge. Like people like Hulk Hogan's a great example of like Hulk Hogan's one of the worst workers and wrestlers that ever work in the business. He truly is bad. He knows like 4 moves. He is a selfish performer. He like refuses
to put people over.
He hates to pit people over clean. But the way he knows how to work a crowd and how to tell a story in the ring is incredible. And that's a huge part of what got him over so much, right?
Okay. Just for 1 second to slow down for me. So there's like, you said moves. So there's like, these are the moves, or does every wrestler have like, here are my own things that I do?
Bit of both.
Yeah, it's called getting your shit in.
So if I
like
yell clothesline,
like,
you know what clothesline means, because we all do clothesline.
Yeah, so there's like a baseline that everybody has. It's like, moonsault, clothesline,
DDT,
like DDT, exactly.
Which is
and
where
then there's
you
like
put
everybody
on a
has
bug
like
repellent, and the other person can't go near you because their name is Sting.
Yeah,
that's
sure.
pretty good.
Why not? You idiot.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I like it a lot.
Sometimes you start with the finish. I start with the beginning of a joke and hope there's an end when I get there. And I got lucky on that one.
Yeah, you take the J.J. Abrams approach to comedy of just like,
But everyone has like what you would call like a signature move, which is like a move that they'll do to like get the audience excited. But it doesn't usually end the match. And then they have what's their finisher, which is like the big like, if they hit this,
you suck
they're
their
about to get
skeleton
the
out through
and
their mouth or
we'll
whatever.
talk about those sort of elements as they kind of work into a match.
Yeah,
so the idea of ring psychology is the way you tell a story. So like if you're like thinking of it like, a story in wrestling can be anything. Like the most simple version is like, hey, I think I'm really good at this. Hey, I think I'm better at this. Let's fight and see what happens, right? But you can still tell a full story by itself in the ring, right? And the way you tell stories in wrestling is like, let's say the finish is going to be like a submission, like a leg hold, right? Well, what you want to do is in the first act of the match, have the guy start working on that leg, right? And then you, as the guy who's getting hit in the leg, you sell that the leg is getting injured. So at the end, when you get pinned in the leg submission, the tension is high. People are aware that leg is injured, right? Or you can do like my favorite story type in wrestling is the old veteran versus the young upstart. And like this is a story you see a lot in wrestling, right? An old veteran comes in, a young peppy kid, and the veteran's like, all right, I'm just going to kick this guy's ass. But then the kid starts to surprise him. And he slowly earns the respect of the veteran. And by the end, like the veteran raises his hand. And you can tell that full story without any setup, without anything outside of the ring. Just have two characters walk in, and through their performances, through the way the veteran sells that he's being impressed by this young kid and getting angry, and like maybe he's going to take it too far, but the kid brings him back, right? Like you can tell a really dramatic story this way.
I'm enjoying this. I'm working on it. I'm going with you.
You're over.
Don't they
getting heat?
It's getting over. Here's my question. Don't they do this like 3 times a week?
Yeah.
With multiple matches per fight? How do you keep finding new interesting ways of telling those stories?
I mean, don't they make a million TV episodes every week? I mean, it's the same thing. Like,
yeah, this is a lot more than that, though. This would be like if one TV show had like 10,000 episodes versus
and
200.
fewer, and could only use the one set.
Yeah,
could only afford one set.
Yeah, you mean like soap operas have been like that's literally what a soap opera is. That's why people call wrestling a soap opera, right? It is. It's that same thing. It's these are long form story things, but it's like that's where storytelling and character comes in. Like that's where like really great wrestlers who are super innovative. People are still coming up with new things to this day. That's one of like the exciting things about wrestling.
In the first act, and I'm like, oh, I'm selling that my leg is a little bit injured, and then in the second act, Stone Cold Steve Austin gives birth to twins, and one of them has amnesia, and then in the third act, I go in the leg submission.
Well, in the third end, you realize Stone Cold is just a figment of your imagination. It's like Fight Club ending.
Ooh, I like that.
Well, no, let's talk about.
Have they done a match where it ends with one person was never actually wrestling?
Maybe I'm sure that's somewhere. Yeah,
hey, the true Stone Cold was inside your head all along.
It's the friends we made along the way.
Invisible men wrestle each other, and the referee sells all the action.
Oh, that's
awesome.
That's pretty good.
It's amazing.
Yeah, so
I like that.
Invisible Man versus Invisible Stan.
Wait. The first guy's name is just Man, or is it Dan? I missed it.
Invisible Man. Yeah. And then his rival, Invisible Stan.
That's weird, though.
That's perfect because then it does seem real. It seems like one person got an idea, then another person got another idea.
I was like, if you're Invisible Man, you would be definitely mad at Invisible Stan. So I buy that part of it for sure.
The best part of the whole match is that it takes place throughout like the arena they're in. At one point, they go on top of a balcony. There's nobody there. It's just the ref reacting to things. One of the guys throws the other one off the balcony, they gimmick the table at the bottom to split as if someone actually went through.
So good.
That's amazing.
It's great.
That's the best wrestling match
Wrestling
of all
rules.
time.
Wrestling
Jamie,
rules.
who won, Jamie? Who won?
I think Invisible Man did, but I can't remember the finish.
Well, presumably he's the original. He's the Invisible veteran, and Invisible Stan is like a kid who's trying to make it big in the Invisible wrestling world.
Yeah. So let's talk about heels. All right. So every wrestling match don't need a face and a heel, but we're doing a very conventional wrestling match here. So let's talk about what a heel does in a match, right? The heel is actually a pretty interesting character. Besides getting heat, which is very, very important, right? So that's what a heel is going to need to do during a match. You want to get the face over, and a heel is actually like the dance lead in a dance, right? A heel sets the pace, and they lead the match. That's what a heel's job is in the match. And the reason why that sort of works, we'll kind of get into in a second. So something that a misconception a lot of people have about wrestling is that wrestling, if you know how to follow it, especially in the West, like movies, most wrestling matches have 3-act structures. All right. And the first act doesn't begin when the bell starts, the act and the story begins as soon as you can see a wrestler. So the entrances is a huge part of the story. Act 1 in wrestling is usually called the shine or the promise. And what it is you use your entrances, you use the characters you build up on the way to the ring to set a promise for what you're going to get in the rest of the match, right? So if you're like a baby face, you come out, you're high-fiving people, you're super excited. You're setting a promise of this is who my character is, right? This is who I am. If I'm a nasty heel and I come out and I'm ripping signs out of children's hands and flipping people off, right? And I'm like, very angry and aggressive, that's the presentation I'm going to do throughout the entire match, right?
Right.
And so once the actual match begins, you have you start to tell the story. When you get into the second act, that's where you have a lot of fun things that you can really sort of do. The second act is usually when the heel takes over, right? In kind of classic conventional wrestling, the rule of thumb is that the heel can never out wrestle the face. Right? The face is always a better wrestler. So that's why the heel has to cheat. That's why the heel has to do things that are underhanded, right? So
this is one of my questions, which is how come they get away with cheating so much? It feels like it's like in another sport you'd be like, oh, that's a $10,000 fine or whatever if you get caught, a 5-second time penalty. They seem like the rules are more flexible.
Well, again,
here.
that's what they are flexible. One, they do change a lot, but that's the importance of a ref, right? Wrestling has this concept of like the ref of the match is the only one who can make calls. So if a ref doesn't see something, it doesn't matter if everyone else saw it. It doesn't count.
There's no VAR. Right. They don't do any instant replay on a wrestling match.
So you use the ref.
Although I would propose, if I was in a writer's room, that's my next idea.
You would propose like a drone in there.
Two ideas. Like a drone. There's a false, or there's one of the wrestlers was never there. It was a figment of their imagination. And the other idea is you add, they're testing, AEW is testing VAR instant replay to get calls right. And then you have a new character, the VAR ref, who is making other wild decisions that really affect it. I think you could do good storylines with the VAR.
No, I think that's great. Well, you bring back RoboCop for the VAR ref, obviously.
Yes.
It's RoboCop.
and then you have to wrestle with the really cool ref.
And
okay, but when the new RoboCop was coming out, people were like, "Is RoboCop going to return to the ring?" That was an actual discussion wrestling fans had.
I love it.
But in wrestling, you have a lot of tools. So you have like a ref bump, right? Ref bumps are very, very common. That's when a heel might pull the ref into the way of like a clothesline, so the ref's knocked out, so you can cheat, right? You have all these different moves. You have one of my favorite things in wrestling that I think is a little overdone now is a false finish. Right, which is a role that is something that really builds tension. That's when, the heel does a big move on the face, goes to pin him, 1-2, he kicks out. Right, that's super exciting, and you can use those to build frustration in a heel, especially if a heel is having to cheat, but the face keeps kicking out. That's where selling comes in. That's where just being shocked and upset and feeling like, oh, now I understand why the heel is cheating, right? That's ring psychology again, right? That is how you tell the story to justify the character. There's other things you can do in wrestling, like getting colors, pretty controversial. That's
I don't love this.
No,
I think I just
about this.
This looks like I think this is, if there's anything that people can maybe bounce off of on the wrestling part of it, it's like,
blood.
No, it's not real. It's real blood.
Some of this stuff's pretty real.
Alex, all of this is real.
There's zombies.
In wrestling, this is thing that's been in wrestling since the beginning. It's called getting color. I think it can be used well. I don't like it if every match has color. Then it's like no matches have color. But getting color, there's two ways to do it. There's the easy way and there's the hard way.
Alex is starting to turn.
I don't love this.
So the hard way.
I was working really hard, Anthony. I want to say, just so you know, I was mostly with you, and this is you've lost me.
Well, hold on. This is only one part of it. Let's maybe this will be all right. What? Tell us about this.
So
Anthony?
the way getting color works is the hard way is exactly what it sounds like. It's the hard way of doing it, right? If you accidentally take a shot to the face and someone cuts your head open, you're going to bleed, right? That's the hard way of getting color.
Okay, it's not intentional.
That's it. It's not intentional, or sometimes it is intentional, and that's just how the wrestler wants to get it, because a lot of wrestlers are lunatics. The easy way is to do something called blading, which is when you take a small razor blade and you cut off a piece of it. You wrap it in duct tape. You either put it like in your gloves, or in your lip, or in your boot, or wherever. And then when the time comes for the spot, when you're going to bleed, you just take it. You give yourself a tiny little cut on your head, and you start to bleed. And the thing about blading is what you're actually seeing here is mostly sweat and a little bit of blood. It's on a magic trick, essentially, right? You are sweating so much in the ring that all it takes is a tiny little bit of blood that's going to spread in that sweat, and it's going to look like you're gushing blood. And it's a very dramatic storytelling beat, right?
Well, if you're going to stick something in your glove and mix it with water, if it's a magic trick anyway, why not just have a blood capsule?
Because this way it keeps coming. Like, your adrenaline, it keeps pumping. Like there are videos of people like blading before a match, and they're doing like tiny little pinpricks that aren't really going to come through until their heart starts racing and they're really into the
okay. I don't love this, but also I don't know how it's like worse than like say like boxing if someone's like actually like hitting each other enough to actually cause bleeding.
This is safer than boxing.
It's the worst thing ever.
Yeah, this is way safer than boxing and UFC. I mean, this to me is more along the lines of like what the type of magic that David Blaine does, right? Which is like technically physical body stuff.
Yeah, I know. You're like, well, man, you know what else? It's sort of like mosquitoes. You know how everyone loves mosquitoes? Yeah. This is sort of like when the coffee's cold, but someone told you it was fresh. This is like one of the, it's normal. It's just like traffic. It's just like it's like being stuck in traffic. You're just
I don't love this
it to things that suck.
But no,
I don't love this, but I don't want to discourage. Like I don't want to taint everything. So
and I want to say, blading is a very controversial thing in wrestling.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is not something that is just widely accepted. It is something old timers talk about. Yeah. You still see it every once in a while, but it is.
You see it a lot with some people.
Yes, some people like to do it a lot more than others.
John Moxley loves it.
Yeah, but I felt like I had to sort of bring it up. I knew going into this was going to be the most controversial thing in my presentation. So I'm glad we had this conversation.
There is a famous soccer blading incident, and I don't remember exactly details. I want to say it was two South American teams. It was like a World Cup run-up match, I want to say, but there was a very famous incident with where somebody threw a firework onto the field, and the goalkeeper of the team that was losing used a small piece of razor blade or glass that he had found on the field and cut his forehead when no one was looking, and then acted like the firework had hit him. And so they were way behind. The whole team got up and left in protest because they were worried about their safety. And then later you could see on replays he was nowhere near it, and he clearly just was doing that.
Dang.
So this is a thing that has existed in other sports that I do like, but man, not a popular choice. I think that guy is disgraced.
But also, I mean, I guess I don't know if how is it that different from like Tom Cruise like injuring himself on like tons of like stunts.
I also don't like that. I mean, yeah.
Okay.
Dude, it's so normal. It's just like when you have a rock in your shoe and you have
okay.
But once we get into Act 3, we get into the finish, right? So that's how a wrestling match ends, and that is, your wrestlers are gonna have a finisher, right? Usually like a big power move. This isn't the case so much anymore, but in classic wrestling, heels would use submissions and faces would always use quick power moves, right? And the reason why that is, I was trying to explain this to my wife, and I came up with a good metaphor I like. The reason why this rule of thumb exists is the same reason why James Bond villains use elaborate traps and Bond uses a Walter PPK. Right? One is there to create tension. One is how is a hero going to get out of this situation? The other is used as a release, right? It is something James Bond can just grab real fast and use.
Yeah.
And the thing is, he can use it on anybody. He can use it on somebody who's 7 feet tall. He can use it on someone who's 3 feet tall, right? He can it works anywhere. And wrestling moves need to kind of work the same way. You want the face's big power move to be able to something that he's coming back from a comeback. The heel just keeps cheating. And all of a sudden he gets a second wind. He gets a hero spot. He does his quick move and bam, can take out the win. Or if a heel, you want them to, when they get the face in that submission, you see the face really selling how much it hurts, how much they need to get out. And the crowd gets behind the face, wanting them to break the hold, grab the ropes, whatever.
It's a strong metaphor. I like it.
I like this a lot.
So that's the way a wrestling match works. And then when we get to the end, there's sort of two ways a wrestling match can end. There's what's called a clean finish or gaga. A clean finish is exactly what it sounds like. That is, I beat you in the ring 1, 2, 3, or I put you in the submission hold in the middle of the ring. You tap out. All right. Now that can be great, but the problem with it is it has a finality to it. You wrap up storylines with clean finishes, but in wrestling, you want to do long form storytelling, right? You want to bring out, stretch out these stories and get angles. So sometimes you can't just end with the good guy beating the bad guy, right? So you do some gaga. You do things to like have, a bad guy's friend come in and hit you with the chair and knocks you out. So this way, when the bad guy pins you, he technically beat you, but did he really beat you? You know what I mean?
Right.
Did he really get that over? But what's really funny is you don't see it or hear about it too much today, but like especially back in the day, the idea of pinning someone over clean, people could be so shitty about that. Like especially like we already talked about Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan was so notorious, especially as somebody who like took advantage of like people like Andre the Giant willing to pit him over clean, which is what fucking made him, right? The fact that he beat Andre clean is like legitimately that is what built him. And then when he got to that point in his career, he would refuse to do it. There's like a famous like in the business, like, oh, that doesn't work for me, brother, is like a cliche for a reason, because Hogan was famous for saying that. And he would always work creative control into his contract because he was so powerful, and he would just refuse to pit people over clean. There always had to be some kind of gaga if he was going to lose, right? Yeah. So this way he could say, I didn't really lose, even though it doesn't really matter again. It's wrestling.
That's a fascinating mental thing. Although it sounds like if it was the thing that got him famous, he understands, look, I would like to stay famous.
Here's the thing. I don't think that's what got him famous. I think it is what got him famous was that he had the loudest, most braggadocious character. He sold it well in the ring. He was able to carry himself with an energy that at the time wasn't seen that often.
Yeah, I mean, he's got the voice that people do when they're doing fake wrestling voice.
Yeah,
but also what it was he was a big New York guy at the time. At the territories, New York was the biggest one because they were buying out everybody else's cable spots. So the reason he got to be so big was that he was the face of the company when they were doing their first big national pull. Anybody else could have been in that spot and would be just as big.
Place, right
Hogan
time.
Just happened to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, it's like there's a difference between like if you look at like the careers of Hogan and like Steve Austin, right? Like Steve Austin is legitimately lightning in a bottle. Like Hulk Hogan was there and helped make Vince McMahon a millionaire. Steve Austin made Vince McMahon a billionaire. Right? Like Vince would have been a millionaire with or without Hogan. I truly believe that. But like Steve Austin as a character and as a performer, right, built the WWF as we know it.
Like Hulk Hogan is a real life heel, right? Like,
yes, he's a real piece of shit.
He sucks. Yeah. And then Stone Cold is like in real life famous for doing like the most Make-A-Wishes of any
No, that's
human.
John Cena.
No, that's John Cena.
You're thinking of John Cena.
Never mind.
Hogan Stone Cold was not a great person.
Yeah.
Okay.
But has become a better person.
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, good.
Like he very much like he's a big like he speaks out like for like trans rights, LGBTQ stuff. Like he posts about it on his Instagram and stuff. He has. But in the 90s, he was maybe not a good guy.
Yeah, he was a professional wrestler in the fucking 90s. I mean, what do you like? Yeah.
It doesn't. Yeah, it does not sound like it was a breeding ground.
Yeah,
for
I mean, like in wrestling, it's like that's kind of like one of the problems with wrestling. Like, it bums me out to know about the Undertaker. Max Calloway is like a shitty person.
I wish he had shut
there's
up
only like the thing that sucks about liking wrestling is that there's literally if you have a benchmark of like only wanting to support like people who have always had good views and always good people, there's literally two people. There's Mick Foley and Kevin Nash. Those are the only two wrestlers who, even in the 90s, had progressive views and were like out and out good people. Right?
Yeah. Mick Foley still rules.
Yeah, Mick Foley still fucking owns. But if we do all this right, what do we get? We get a pop the crowd. We get this. I wanted to look at some of these photos of just like the emotions that wrestling can bring out. This is like a really famous photo right here. This guy is literally shook. He had his world destroyed. This is a very famous photo from WrestleMania when Undertaker Undertaker kind of had this narrative they built over 20-something years of he never lost at WrestleMania, and he finally did a few years ago. And this was this guy's reaction when the Undertaker finally lost.
Guys, yeah, just like mouth open, eyes just like sort of staring.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of just like there's a lot of real feelings.
Video of
This is the face I made when the last episode of season 1 of Severance was over. When they were just like, hey, guess what? There's no ending to this season with no resolution to any stories. That's the face I made. I was that shook and angry.
Oh, it's a good show. I get it.
I liked it until that point.
Yeah, what's funny about this is that if you look at the video of this, people keep moving. He sits completely still like this for like 2 minutes. It is amazing. There's obviously the Miz girl, this little girl who was so upset that her favorite wrestler lost.
Yeah, it looks like this girl is kind of like going to light something on fire with her eyes.
Yeah. To be clear, this is strong Matilda vibes. She is definitely moving something with her mind right there.
We have this guy crying for the return of CM Punk, some kids freaking out, right? This is what is so amazing about wrestling, is even that it is so silly and it requires a bit more suspension of disbelief than a lot of other forms of theater. If you're willing to give in, I love going to the theater. I go and I see, musicals multiple times a year. I love live theater. I have felt a lot of things doing that, but there are feelings of being in like a wrestling show with like 16,000 people. The only common denominator is that you're all wrestling fans, and like a big moment happens and the crowd pops and everyone is on their feet. The energy is in the room. It's so incredible. Truly. Yeah. Like, there were moments in wrestling, like doing research, just watching stuff. I was like rewatching, just like Mick Foley winning the title the first time, and there's like a legendary pop from Stone Cold coming out of nowhere and like saving the day. That is so loud and is so dramatic. It like literally made me tear up watching it this week. Just the emotion 20 years later, like I can still feel the energy and the emotion and the power of this like months of story building to this incredible moment, right? And that is sort of what makes wrestling so unique and special, right?
I love this. I just want to just toss it out there that what you're describing is sports. You're just describing sports.
No,
but sports
better than sports.
Yeah, I think whoever saw the end of the last like Super Bowl knows that the storylines don't always end well, right? It can be very disappointing.
But there are. This is why sports documentaries are like bigger than a lot of those sports that they're about. This is why like Drive to Survive on Netflix is a much bigger hit than Formula One is in the United States, because watching a documentary about a sport, they can do just the stories.
Yeah, no, Alex,
they can set the stuff in the beginning and pay it off at the end that you know is going to happen. And the thing you're describing about being in a stadium full of people when something incredible happens is sports.
No,
and it doesn't
Alex,
happen every...
I have been in Blazer games when they won at the buzzer, right? That's a great feeling. Wrestling is different. I guarantee you wrestling is different, right? And the thing is, you in a sports game, you build to that over a whole game and you get it once, right? In wrestling, if you do it right, you can get it multiple times a night. You tell multiple
pops. The Blazer game where you were a person who's followed the Blazers since you were a kid and it really mattered. Also, the Blazers never do anything good, so you don't have to worry about that. Like, if you follow, if you want, like, British soccer, like, these are like, the team started in the 1890s. These are teams your grandparents watched and you watched because they did. When those storylines pay off, when the coach that they hired 5 years ago, when they got a new investor and they started changing the way the team plays, and then that team comes from behind, like that storyline. Like I'm
Alex,
sure it's amazing.
Can I tell you
on your side here,
no,
Anthony?
You're not.
It's
here's
just
the thing.
that you haven't done the other thing.
No, here's the thing, Alex. Alex, I just spent 40 minutes explaining to you what's different about it than sports, and you just didn't get it at all. And I feel like I have failed as a teacher.
No, but you're not a sports fan. But what the confusing part is.
I'm trying to explain why it is framed as a sports competition. It's going to have overlap. But what I have just tried to explain is what actually is the craft of wrestling. What is actually
I think you're wrong, Anthony. I think this is identical to just regular
sport. Stop. No. Hunter comes out of nowhere with a chair to the back for Anthony.
So I think I know what the breakdown is that the sports only give you the one thing. Like, you can watch a post-show conference, maybe learn some motivations, come up with heroes and villains. You can maybe get that from some of the actions during the match. But with wrestling, you get those promos right in front of you.
Yeah, and
the entrances are part of the showmanship. You have to watch all of it to get the full story. And it's presented in such a neat little package as opposed to sports. Like you said, the documentary is more important than the show. It has better ratings, but you have to find out that documentary. They don't show that as part of the
And the thing is,
if they did,
also,
maybe people would be more invested.
If we're only talking about wrestling as like this kind of big pop moment, wrestling is also comedy. It is also drama. Right?
A lot of comedy.
Right. There are different emotions. Like
there's romance.
Romance. There are things that you just genuinely will not get in sports because they're not doing love triangle stories.
Anthony, is not that I'm disagreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you, and then you're saying the thing that you don't watch can't possibly be this, and that's what's weird. Literally everything you're describing is sports.
Anyway,
everything you're describing is something that happens.
I think podcasts are sports, basically. I mean,
this really is the competition of the year, right?
So here's the thing.
Thank you so much,
Anthony. It was an amazing job. Thank you so much for all of that.
That was great.
We now have a tight timeline because I have sports to watch at 1:00. So we are gonna burn through this next bit of the show. We did a long presentation today. Keep the rest of it tight. Now it's time to pay the bills.
This week's episode of The Best Thing Ever is brought to you by Telling a Friend.
Tell a friend. It's like a tag team, but for your mouth.
You could tell a friend about something bad.
Duck, brother, you're going to get hit by a ladder.
You could tell a friend about something good.
Sting, your creepy crow makeup is getting heat. You're going to pop the crowd for sure.
And if you tell a friend about the best thing, you might just make everybody's day.
Hey, buddy, check out this episode of the Best Thing Ever podcast on wrestling. I think you'd like it. Plus, being friends with you is my best thing ever.
Tell a friend about an episode they'd like of the Best Thing Ever podcast. It's good for your friend, and it's good for us, your parasocial friends.
Wrestling catchphrase!
All right, so it is time for our 3-step review process. In the name of time today, in the name of finishing this in a hurry, we're just going to go with a 2-step process. All that matters today are strengths and weaknesses. So from watching that presentation and from everything you know, I want to hear your strengths and weaknesses of professional wrestling. I am going to go first because mine are pretty simple. My strengths are going to be, it's like sports. And I will further say, I think what is happening with this is that it's got sort of the vibe of like sort of condensing sports. It's like you're taking sports and you're like, I'm going to show you the best parts the fastest. I'm going to get to those. I'm going to squish these together so you don't have to wonder if there's going to be a good story. It's going to be the good story every season. So I like that. It's like sports, but like condensed milk version of sports. Weaknesses are real human blood on purpose. I don't like that. That's bad.
Weakness is blood.
Blood is my only weakness.
Blood is the weakness.
Bad times. And then my other weakness is going to be belt too big. I don't think you can hold up anything
like
with
a
that.
chunky belt.
It's impractical. I think you're going to need suspenders still, and everyone knows that's no good. You need suspenders to hold up your belt, and I don't like that.
I like that costume-wise is what you've zeroed in on as being the major problem.
Everything else seemed fine. That was my big issue. Belt too big.
Would you have to have like one of the bigger ones, or like John Cena had a belt that was also a spinner, like a spinner rim, like the front plate spun on it?
No, I don't like that either.
I think you would like
the
that.
thing is, I don't know if you bought a belt recently. They're super expensive.
Yes.
I just want a good belt. That's what I want. Like, you're the championship of wrestling. Your pants stay up.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be funny if they just gave you like a regular belt, like it's not big at all. It's just like,
They
here's
used to be
the belt.
smaller. They used to just be like a fancy belt buckle.
Yeah.
And then to compete with other things, they're like bigger and bigger and bigger until the NWA introduced the 10 pounds of gold, which looks ugly. It looks really bad. But that's like
wild. So it's belt inflation.
Well, and also, you know,
I blame the banks as usual.
one of my favorite things about like wrestling is sort of like the weird language thing and like the way that goes from place to place, and like Vince McMahon, for sort of all of his shittiness, one of my favorite things about him is that he's very specific about the language he uses on his shows. Like, he will fire you if you call it a belt. It is a championship title.
Yeah.
Whoa.
He hates the word hospital. It's a medical facility. That's the only thing you can call them. He famously hates pronouns. And not like in like a shitty, like I hate woke people way. I mean, he just hates if somebody uses a pronoun and not the person's name around them.
Well, right, because
it's better branding if you use the person's name. I get that.
It's very much a branding.
Yeah, but he
will also change wrestlers' names and then requires announcers to call. Like, they're not Seth Rollins, it's Seth freaking Rollins now.
Yeah.
You have to consistently call them by the thing.
So that's his main skill set, it sounds like, is branding.
Wait,
His main skill set is molesting women and getting removed from the company.
Yes.
But outside
sorry,
of that,
really quick, if you could pause for 1 second, I'm going to add that to my weaknesses list.
I say Steve Jobs, but terrible.
Yeah, Vince seems like kind of a. All right, I don't like Vince now.
Yeah, he's not a great guy.
Now.
Well, I didn't know before.
Yeah, I want to keep my strengths. Kayfabe is a fun word. Something we didn't really talk about.
Great word.
Kayfabe is the reality of wrestling. It is a nonsense word that was purposely designed so that, you know, if somebody who wasn't into wrestling came up, a wrestler could be like, "Hey, keep it kayfabe," and that person wouldn't know what they were talking about, but the wrestlers would know.
Sure.
It can be great. There's fun words. My biggest weakness is it can be really bad. And that again goes into my point though of like I would like us to not hold wrestling against wrestling. All right. I am presenting this as like the idea of wrestling and how good it is. But most wrestling is very bad.
Jamie, what are your pros and cons? You don't have to throw them on the board. You can if you want to post it, but you don't have to. What are your pros and cons of wrestling?
So my pros are so many. I don't know if I can limit it. One, it has. There's an old joke about when you start stand-up comedy. It's like, hey, here's the people who suck, and here's an encyclopedic knowledge of Monday Night Raw for some reason. Wrestling is such an easy way to bond with people, in not only in comedy, but in so many things that I like that it's a common core concept with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Even if they're not really into it, some of them watched it as a kid, and there's always like a good starting ground for like conversations with some people.
Right.
I love that it brings in weirdos. I love the weirdos in wrestling. Like Mick Foley was like my favorite wrestler as a kid, but also nowadays there are just so many, like Hangman Adam Page, who I just mentioned. His whole gimmick is socially anxious cowboy. That's his gimmick. And
I like that.
It rules. It sincerely rules. There are like things about him being like unable to come clean to his friends about things, and it makes their relationship worse. And he will openly talk about how like, hey, I wish I could have been honest with you. I couldn't have been. That's my fault. But he'll use that drive to try and be a better person. And I relate to that on a very important level. It's also hot people beating the shit out of each other. And on a very carnal level, that appeals to me.
Yeah.
In ways that I'm maybe not psyched about to admit openly. But like, as an openly queer person, I'm like, yeah, give me these fucking Adonis dudes just wrenching each other's with chairs and throwing each other through tables.
So I get the hot people part. Why is the fighting part fun? Like if I
because
see a hot
they're
person, my main
sweaty
thing is
and
like,
they're
man, I hope
glistening,
no one hits
and
Now,
they're doing
let's go deep on this
crazy
subject right
holds
here.
on each
Yeah,
other.
Alex.
Like,
I
you want me to go deeper?
No, I just feel like if I see somebody hot, I'm like, man, I hope no one hits this person with a chair today.
Well, they're fighting the other hot people, so
Right.
it's like,
Oh, right.
hey,
So the hot
I'm
person's
hot, you're
also
hot.
wielding the chair.
It's an even ground.
Yeah,
You know what I
and-
mean?
My favorite in those pictures were the ugly people, but I like that, and I like when they get to fight with the hot people.
Well, you have
That's fun
to
for me.
understand,
like
Alex. The first hot person said the second hot person wasn't as hot as him. So there's like something on the line, right?
Sure.
You're, like
Wait,
invested
Is this
in
just Real Housewives? This is just Real Housewives, right?
Kind of.
Basically, yeah.
Kind of.
What else you got, Jamie?
That's what I love.
That's perfect.
What I don't like is that I don't like that it's a lot of ego. We talked on Hulk Hogan, but that still goes around today. CM Punk, who famously came back after like a 7-year hiatus, had a like huge falling out with a bunch of like producers and like bit another man behind the scenes. Or no, his friend bit another man. He just
Right,
maybe
you have your
punched one of the
factions do
producers
the
in
dirty work,
face.
so you can save it for the fight.
Yeah, but like it's just ego. I just don't want.
But yeah.
Like it's like the same thing as comedy. And we all suffer from it, but I hate ego like ruining good opportunities.
Hunter, that leaves you.
Yeah,
I see one card on here, and it's a strength. What is it?
Yeah, I don't have much of an opinion on all the stuff that everyone else has said as far as weaknesses, but I will say this is all I have to add. Wrestling, or especially amateur wrestling, is a really good date. Especially it's a really good first date, because then it also serves as a litmus test. Like if you wouldn't agree to go to an amateur wrestling night, I don't want to be anywhere near you. You know what I mean? You're not coming over to my house. we're not going to eat cookies together or nothing. But I just think it's great.
Look, if you're calling it that, I don't think you're old enough to do it.
I'm not calling it anything. That was not, whatever. Anyways, the point is this. It's a great date night. All right. You go, you get to drink and yell at people you don't know.
Yeah.
And I want to hear, especially if it's maybe it's like a second date or a third date. I want to know what you yell at people that you don't know. You know what I mean? And I want to hear I want to, if it's being in a wrestling audience and getting into that, even if you don't know anything about wrestling, I think is an important kind of thing for me to know about somebody, that they are not going to just be in a room full of other human beings getting hella on board with this thing and resist that. Because I can't. I've never been able to resist it. If I'm in a crowd of people and it's mob mentality.
Yeah,
basically
buddy,
and we're going to do anything, I'm down. No, I just mean it's just a good test of people.
I just want to point out, I think legally speaking, nothing that you say in this podcast can be used against you. You've not been briefed. So if you end up doing any group crimes, this is all parody technically, so you can't use this in a court of law.
Listen, the only group I'll be in is a wrestling audience, okay? That's what I'm saying. And why would they do any crimes?
All right, well, then it's gonna be, I cannot wait to see how this goes. It's time to rank it.
Hell yeah.
At this time, ranking the master list, please read for everybody the top 5, the current standings, the master list of best things ever.
Okay, number 5, going from the bottom to the top, playing Halo with the boys. Cat videos, fresh bread at 3, My Neighbor Totoro at 2, and then warm beverages, number 1.
So,
Anthony,
you guys give me number 3, and I will be happy. I will never fight on anything ever again. On this, I think wrestling is better than it's definitely better than playing Halo with the boys. It's definitely playing better than cat videos. I think. I would accept behind fresh bread. I personally think it is better than fresh bread. I probably think it's better than My Neighbor Totoro, but that seems like a line too far.
You have been saving. So obviously you're speaking crazy nonsense, but you have been saving up political capital for 4 weeks on this show with this purpose.
And I'm not alone. Thankfully, I think Jamie might. Also have a vote.
So you weren't here for the other discussion. So Jamie, what's your gut reaction before Ezra starts moving stuff around prematurely? What is your gut reaction to seeing this list? Where does pro wrestling fall?
So my problem with this list is that I think pro wrestling is better than some of the things higher on the list,
right?
But not necessarily some of the things lower on the list.
So just give it to me. So what's above? What beats pro wrestling for you?
What beats pro wrestling for this and me is probably. Solely, the only one that does would be playing Halo with the boys.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh wow. And so everything else is below it. You think so? Yes. You'd say if you were redoing this list, it would be playing Halo with the boys, pro wrestling, and then whatever.
And then probably warm beverages.
Well, I just want to point out, Jamie, just because you weren't on the episode, so if I can just summarize it for you real quick. We did the idea and concept real dirty. I believe the first thing that was mentioned in the presentation about playing Halo with the boys was something about boys being stinky. Yeah. That's where we started in our presentation. And then we got to this point, it was like...
Homie's got a shower to come hang.
Dude, we talked about wrestling for like an hour and a half today. We didn't mention stink one time.
Stink at live events is wild.
First off, Hunter
is doing Anthony dirty right now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Hunter
said the boys were stinky, and he was part of it, and he had fond memories tied to that scent.
And I just want to say first off, Hunter, what's this presentation bullshit? That's my presentation. If you got a problem with it, fucking say it to my face.
Oh my god! Cage Max next week, guys. Cage Max next week.
No, what is this fucking no? It was.
Has anybody made the case that boys are not stinky at any point in history? Has anyone wanted to take that side of the argument?
I'm just talking about framing. You know what I mean? Like if we're framing something up to talk about on our podcast where we evaluate everything, and the first point is people are pretty stinky, right? And that is really telling of where we're going with the episode.
I thought I was a pretty good presentation. That was pretty fair. And covered the important.
Fair.
I'm not saying the presentation was false or wrong or anything. I'm saying it was motivated. It had an agenda.
Hunter, let's say you got your way. You move Halo anywhere you want. Where do you put pro wrestling and where do you put Halo on this list?
Oh, no. This is a group effort, and I think you're not going to get me.
You just want to throw a stink. You don't want to actually put your money anywhere.
Yeah, you're throwing stones from
throwing a stinky boy.
House,
Yeah.
I think that it would make sense if maybe Act 1 of pro wrestling on the list was that it got done dirty. And then Act 2, and then Act 2, something happens to it. And then Act 3, it succeeds and is number 1 or whatever.
May I make an argument?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
So fresh bread is fleeting.
Yeah.
Pro wrestling is forever.
That is true. What I've been
We have decades of history.
Fresh.
Almost millennia.
I mean, Brett has also been here for
cat videos. I can only watch like 2 of those before I get bored. Give me something else.
I would say of this list, the thing that's probably the weirdest for me is how poorly cat videos have been doing, especially with 2 cat people. Like, you're sitting in front of a giant cat tree, Jamie.
It's not actually actual cat.
Yeah.
Like, it's not cats. It's cat videos.
I
love my cats.
So not breaking my heart at all, I can very easily put it at number 4 above cat videos and playing Halo with the boys. If everyone else was on board, I would my heart would hurt a little bit, but I'd be okay, with fresh bread moving down also.
It's interesting because Ezra, you were the most committed to fresh bread of the group by a long shot. You're also
this is our master. Well, it's our master list, It's not like my master list. I know where that is.
Can I throw? Okay, so I didn't want to do too much history about pro wrestling because I thought it might turn you off. I'm just going to throw some facts about pro wrestling.
Then
Did you know
become too long.
Pro wrestling was the first televised sport? There might not
Alex
be.
has to watch sports.
Yeah, there might not be sports on TV if it wasn't for pro wrestling.
Oh,
so I'm with Ezra in that, I feel like you've convinced me that I will put it above cat videos because of story and human emotion and
all the work that's gone into this.
Yeah, I like the human ingenuity of it. I like the acting of it. That puts it above cat videos for me. I mean, I love cat videos, and I do feel like they're dirty on this list. Or actually, there's 5 of them, and I like all the things on here. So it's a good list. A podcast that I listen to about sports a lot talks about sports as one of the things they say all the time on the show is if you're not a better person if your team won today, you're not a worse person if your team lost. We are all here making memories, and that is what I love about sports is the making memories parts. I like the social aspect of it. All those pictures of human emotion that you showed me, those are the memories that those people made from that day of watching that show. And I think that rules. And all of us are in show business. So this is a business, this show, and we like that. I think that's all great. Every minute of the day, I would take fresh bread over pro wrestling. So that gets you get me over cat videos. You've gotten me over cat videos for a thing that I've never cared about before versus something that I love. I'm telling you, putting that forth is a big move for me.
Can I offer one more potential argument?
Yeah.
Sometimes you get to see celebrities get beat up while they wrestle.
That's true.
Did RoboCop win or lose?
He won. But I'm talking about Logan Paul famously recently hurt himself pretty bad in a wrestling match. Bad Bunny, pretty good wrestler. Shaq had an amazing tag match with Cody Rhodes.
Jay Leno once wrestled.
What?
Also true. Yeah. David Arquette, former WCW World Heavyweight Champion.
Yeah, David Arquette was the world champion for a while in WCW.
David Arquette almost died in a death match.
Yeah.
Here's my feeling. I think the actual place this belongs is 5.
You're crazy.
I think you've convinced me, Anthony, from the story that 4 is plausible. And I think you have built up the political capital for me to go with you and put this 3.
I think yes.
I think if you'd fought harder on previous, I still think Neighbor Totoro is way too high, but if you fought harder on previous episodes, I would not be as tolerant right now, but you said I'm saving it for episode 6. You said it multiple times. I'm taking you at your word for that. I'm willing to call it 3 for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, until we inevitably do the Dark Souls episode, which will happen, even though you guys keep telling me it won't.
Do a swapsies of some kind.
I can't imagine fighting for anything as hard as I would like to see pro wrestling higher on the list.
Okay. Look, Anthony, you've put in so much work on this one. I feel like you kind of deserve this audience pop,
Hunter,
I guess.
Do you have anything against it?
I just want to clarify that if we put pro wrestling number 3 right now, I'm not going to be invested in any kind of ongoing storyline of what happens with pro wrestling's eventual placement. If we do it dirty today, then I will continue to be interested.
Okay, that's
but
true.
As mostly an audience member of this podcast, I will say, I will consider the pro wrestling arc to be finished by the end of this episode.
That's a good point, and you've convinced me of that as well.
I mean,
Anthony,
I think.
What do you
Anthony,
think?
how do you want to write your story?
Yeah, how do you want to write the story?
I personally, I think I'd rather take the blow off today and get it because there's no way I feel like I'm not just asking for a chair shot and a heel turn from all of you later when somehow pro wrestling moves down further. It's just like, no, we're gonna move it down one more
regardless. Anthony, you got to be ready for that.
That's gonna I think if you what Hunter said is true. If you put this third, there's going to be some gaga.
That's fine.
But if you put this fourth or fifth, then it could only appreciate in hindsight.
That was not my point. My point is that I will not be invested in the wrestling placement if we don't do it dirty today, because Act 1 it's supposed to get done dirty right now. The number 3 is fine.
I mean,
that's just like,
I think you could argue 3 is pretty dirty, so I think I'm taking a hit already.
All right, Ezra, we're gonna call it here. Ezra, please read for us the master list.
Okay, bottom and top. Number 6, Halo with the Boys. 5, cat videos. 4, fresh bread. 3, pro wrestling. 2, My Neighbor Totoro, and 1, warm beverages.
All right,
it's a pretty good list.
It's a pretty solid list. We can all agree on that.
I like all these things.
Really quick, I want to do some business. I have a letter that I want to read from Leanne. This is about our warm beverages episode last week. Leanne, speaking for a lot of people, we had a bunch of other comments as a representative mailbag. I can't believe you didn't discuss hot chocolate at all.
Whoa.
In the warm beverages episode. I'm so disappointed in you guys. I can't stand coffee, but coffee shop hot chocolate is the absolute bomb because it's made with freshly heated milk and really good cocoa mix, and they'll put whipped cream on top if you want. And I will say I like a coffee shop where they melt chocolate. You see them drop some chocolate bars in there and then hit it with the steamer. Hell yeah. I've been on a hot cocoa kick since the holidays, and I've been making it at home with milk and high-end cocoa mixes like Starbucks or Trader Joe's, although TJ's is over for the season. Hot cocoa mixes that you make with water, blow. Don't even waste your time unless you have access to milk, although hot bread is still better than hot beverages. So just so you know, I think in general, the people are upset. The thing I've seen the most upset is the placement of bread being downgraded and that we did not mention hot chocolate. That's the angriest people have been, is that we did not bring up hot chocolate.
For now, we'll see what happens this one.
So I'm sure we have better plans,
see if we get heat.
Plans later. How do we do that? As you buy a lot of hot chocolate, probably more than the rest of us.
I actually feel really bad about this one because this was like our go-to beverage for the kids. Like for a lot of COVID, we were just like, hey, we can't go anywhere. We're just gonna go get some hot chocolate, like in a drive-through at Starbucks. And that was like it was a lot of our experiences.
One of my favorite things is when you set up a meeting with somebody at a coffee shop, and then they order hot chocolate. You're like doing business, and they're like, well, I don't like coffee, but this is where people do business. So I like hot chocolate.
Here, I'm going to drink a chocolate bar while I'm here.
To me, it's kind of like when I see adults order root beer. It's like that. What are you doing? Like what? Why are you drinking root beer? What are you
living their best life is what they're doing.
What are you, 6? I love it. What are you drinking root beer? What is happening?
We're going to add hot chocolate posthumously into that and keep warm beverages at number 1. And then our honest 5-star review of the week. We got a couple of good ones this week, but from Patty Co., who says Totoro was robbed. So far, overly weighting the enjoyment of fresh bread, but very funny. All right, so that's an anti-fresh bread take. So we've gotten some pro-fresh bread. I think what ends up being controversial is really interesting. I think that'll be very interesting in the long run. It may affect me on how I vote for stuff. But so if fresh bread stays controversial, it stays in the middle. That's how I feel. Next week, we have a very interesting episode coming up. Next week, we're going to be talking about trees.
Is that a trees?
The best
joke, is it?
This is real.
Did we actually decide to do trees? I don't remember doing this.
Well, it's a guest.
It's a guest. This is Bree Pruitt is going to join us, longtime friend of the show, and I let
it's
guests
great you all are
suggestions.
branching out. Getting really to the root of the problem.
All right.
Jamie's
want me to leave?
heel
I can
turn.
go.
All right. I hate you. Yeah. All right, that is it for our show. Our theme music is by @Metrix. Our logo design is by Tom Typography. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter @BTE Pod. You can also watch the video and follow for excerpts and more at youtube.com/Alex Falcone. You can leave us an honest 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or other podcasting platforms. And you can send us mail @bestthingeverpodcast.com. Let us know what our worst ranked item is so far, what you would change, what's most controversial, and whether we did the right thing on Anthony's political decisions. The show is produced by the Duke of Jill, the best assistant regional manager Sean, and Claire, titled TBD. I'm Alex Falcone at Alex_Falcone on TikTok. Ezra, thanks for hanging out. Ezra Fox.
Of course.
Mr. Anthony Lopez, thanks for all your hard work.
Woo!
And Hunter Donaldson, again, you can watch Old Gamers Almanac live taping Wednesday the 22nd in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, congratulations. You can also listen to Old Gamers Almanac anytime you like, podcast about older video games. And thank you so much, our very special guest, Jamie Carbone, at Jamie Carbone on all the socials, especially TikTok. Right?
Yes. Yeah, you're right. I'm just glad that your bark isn't as bad as your bite.
No, come on. Why?
It would be so easy not to. That's, at every moment you could have chosen, and you chose violence. All right.
I chose violence because I heel turned, baby.
Thanks for being here. We'll talk to everybody next week on The Best Thing Ever.
Bye.
Bye.